What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to the Cinephile Diaries. This is it. This is the big one. This is episode 20. We are officially, I think we passed it like 10 weeks ago, but this is officially the longest running podcast I've ever done, about 10 weeks ago. I didn't say that then, but I'm saying it now. This is going to be a weird show, not going to lie. Like, I have no idea what to title this week's episode. I was in a horror mood this week, but the marketable thing that I watched is Across the Spiderverse, which is not a horror movie. So you've got this one, like, PG animated kids movie, and then 3 horror movies. Hard R horror movies. I have no idea how to market this week's episode of the podcast, but it's not like I was going to make money off of it anyway. So, who cares? Yeah. Let's go ahead and jump into it. There's not really going to be a roundup this week. I forgot a couple things in the roundup last week, though. I watched the final season of The Flash. It was awful. And then there's a show on Apple TV Plus called Silo that's really good. Really good performances, and the mystery's really good. I definitely recommend you check that out. Yeah, there's not really going to be a roundup because, like, I'm not even caught up on Silo. Obviously, we're going to talk about Ted Lasso, so there's not, like, nothing like that to do. Nothing like that to talk about. But, yeah, we are going to do one thing that's out of the ordinary. I'm going to introduce a new segment, which I know I said I'm trying to, like, manage the length of the show, which I'm still trying to do, but I actually like the idea of doing this segment. It was kind of a spur in the moment thing, but I like the idea of it, so we're gonna do it. And yeah, let's go ahead and jump in to the Cinephile Diaries. Okay, so we are gonna start this week with a new segment. I think I'm only gonna do one question a week, but we're gonna do a fan question every week. We're gonna do a fan question of the day, or of the week, I guess. And yeah, I'm just gonna talk about that. I put out a thing on Instagram. If you want to have a question on the show, feel free to follow me on Twitter. I don't think I'm gonna get my Instagram out, but feel free to follow me on Twitter. I don't know. I might. I don't know. We'll see. But as of right now, the best way to get a question on the show is to follow me on Twitter, and I'll post about it next week. And you can, if you want me to answer a question on the show, I'll put a post out about it, and you can ask the question, and then I will answer it. The question for this week is, least favorite movie or TV show. And I guess I'm gonna answer both because I have an answer for both. In terms of TV, I don't really have, like, an answer. But I have, like, a type of show. And that type of show is, like, Big Bang Theory, Young Sheldon, and The Good Doctor. And there's 3 kind of prongs to why I don't think these shows work. With Young Sheldon, I haven't watched the show very much, so I don't, like, maybe it is significantly better than Big Bang Theory. But with Big Bang Theory, there is this, like, obviously Sheldon is very autistic coded. He's very neurodivergent coded. In fact, the only reason he's not, like, explicitly explained to be neurodivergent is probably because if they explain he's neurodivergent, then they're not allowed to make fun of him the way that they do. So many of the jokes in that show are at the expense of Sheldon. And that's not good. Like, that's not good. Taking a character, like, yes, you're allowed to laugh at your quirks, sure, but taking a character who has an experience that a lot of people have, of a brain that works differently than everyone else's, having that experience is not you're not helping anyone by laughing at that. You're not doing anything good by laughing at that. And that's all Big Bang Theory does. The other thing about Big Bang Theory is that show's about nerd culture, but it's not written by people who are nerds or who care about nerd culture. So there's no there's no love in that show. There's no love for the thing like that. Like it's all about making fun of this thing that is important to a lot of people, including myself. Um, yeah, I just not a good show at all. With Young Sheldon, maybe the show's significantly better than Big Bang Theory. I haven't watched the show seriously in a really long time. But there was this episode where Sheldon had a Vietnamese friend, and the kid came over to his house, and I guess because he lives in a small town in Texas, we're just supposed to be okay with the fact that Sheldon's parents are like, "So do you eat dog? Do you support the war? Like, what? What? Am I supposed to like these people? Because they're being assholes. Like, am I supposed to like these people? Because they're not being very nice. Yeah, just not good. And then with like The Good Doctor, it's just a bad show. It's just a show where every bit of the conflict is because Sean is difficult, because the autistic character is difficult. That's every bit of the conflict. And like the pilot of that show, um, has him use it as a superpower, which is fun. Like it absolutely is a superpower. Being autistic is absolutely a superpower. Um, but whenever you get into the difficult side of autism, and this is once again, I have not seen every episode of the show, so I may be completely off base. But once you get into the difficult side of it, once someone who's autistic, once their needs actually rub up against a neurotypical person, once you get to that point, then it's a negative. Then Sean's the bad guy, and that's bullshit. That's really dumb. Uh, yeah, I don't know. In terms of movies, I don't really have an answer because I don't watch bad movies. I do have an answer. I have two. Um, first of all, the back in like 2020, the Disney Plus Artemis Fowl movie is awful. I never read those books. I just watched the movie, and the movie is just so unbelievably bad. The fact that it's Kenneth Branagh, who's a good director, the fact that it's Kenneth Branagh makes that like mind-boggling how bad that movie is. But like it's shot horribly. The CGI is awful. Um, I don't know what the hell Judi Dench was doing in that movie. Like the whole thing is just miserable. On a more like personal preference, my books when I was a kid, most people had, Harry Potter or Percy Jackson. I had Philip Reeves's Mortal Engines Quartet, which is or the Hungry City Chronicles. Basically, there's an apocalypse happens, so cities basically like build wheels and then put the city on the wheels and drive around and eat each other. It's great. The books the books are incredible because yes, there's that. There's a satirical element that's really good that I didn't actually fully notice as a kid, and then the characters are just incredible, and you get to see each character. There's four books. You get to see each character over phases of their lives, and it's incredible. They made a movie 2019, I think, and it just misses the mark so completely. It misses the mark so completely. Like it takes Mortal Engines and turns it into just another. Like it tries to make it Star Wars, which is not what Mortal Engines ever was. It was never Star Wars. So it just completely misses the point of everything that I loved about it, and it adapts the first book, which is probably my least favorite. I mean, it's still a really good book, but like because it was so bad and because it flopped so hard, it robbed me of the other three stories, which I really would love to see adapted. Like, yeah, so And I feel like a movie's the only way to do that because like there's such large time jumps in between each book. Like there's a couple. The first two were like a duology, and then the last two were like a duology. But there's such big time jumps that I don't think you could do it as a TV show. I mean, I'm getting maybe House of the Dragon proves that you could, but I don't think you could. I think it would have to be movies. Um, but yeah, so the one that like hurts the most is probably Mortal Engines. Just completely misses the mark on everything that made that story special. Everything, including the humor and the satire. Just yeah, very very infuriating. That is the question of the week. Let's jump into. I guess we got to talk about the Ted Lasso finale. This might be a long episode because I have a lot to say about a lot of the stuff that I watched. This might be a long episode. We got to talk about the Ted Lasso finale. Let's do that. Okay, so the Ted Lasso finale is a little bit of a strange beast because I'm not sure if I just love this show too much. If I have just like paid too much attention and like buried myself in it too much. But even then, like a lot of the stuff that I thought was going to happen felt obviously set up, and then it just didn't happen. No way, no, because they genuinely like, oh, it's going to happen. They genuinely like the opening scene of the finale. It's like, oh, it's going to happen. It happened. And no, it didn't. No, it didn't. And we're never going to pay it off. Ugh. The Ted Lasso finale, I think it's a really, really good season finale. Like, Sudeikis has been very open about the fact that this seasons 1 through 3 is the story that they wanted to tell. That's the idea that they had going into season 1. This was their end game. And I think I'm starting to understand what they meant by that, because this finale is actually kind of magical in how well it pays off the last 3 seasons. There are callbacks and references to things from like every episode, every single thing. Barbecue sauce, be a goldfish, the Nate's False Nine, or like the fake out play. There's so many callbacks and references to the journey that we have been on, and it pays off all of that so well. It's actually amazing. It's actually mesmerizing. And that was what I said in my initial reaction that I posted as a YouTube short on the YouTube channel. That's what I said. Was it's amazing how much this episode pays off the entirety of the last 3 seasons. But it superficially, it pays off all the lines. It pays off all of that. But it makes several decisions, and I don't know if these decisions were made because they decided they were going to do a season 4, and so they left a bunch of problems unresolved, or if they just completely lost the plot of what this show was. I've talked about Ted Becca. I've talked about Ted Becca a couple times. There's literally an episode of the podcast called I Swear to God I'm Not a Shipper. A huge part of the reason that episode is called I Swear to God I'm Not a Shipper is because of Ted Becca. I thought Ted Becca was happening. It's because it's so set up. From season 1, those two characters have the exact same baggage. They're soulmates. They're so lined up. They're so lined up together. And the psychic earlier this season pointed that out. Like, she didn't know she was pointing that out, but she points out that they have the same baggage. They're perfect for each other. And then Ted Becca didn't happen. And then it didn't happen in the series finale. What? Why would you abandon the thing you just spent 3 seasons setting up for a character we met one time who she barely knows? Why would I care about that? Why would I care about that? Yeah, I don't. So Ted at the beginning of the episode decides to leave. He decides to leave at the end of last week's episode, um, and then he just kind of does that. Like he does that, and he doesn't seem happy about it. He doesn't seem like Ted. He gives a really good speech, and the speech is great, and but he doesn't seem present and or in the moment at all throughout the episode. He seems very dissociated. And specifically Rebecca, because she's in love with him, which apparently they just abandoned. It's like they wrote the first 40% of they wrote the first 60% of this episode with the intention of doing a season 4. And then for the last 20 pages they were like, "Nope, this is it. This is the end. This is the end. We're going to wrap everything up in a really superficial and stupid way." But I have a theory about it. Not really a theory, it's wishful thinking. So at the end of the episode, Ted is on the plane and Beard leaves, gets himself off the plane, and it's a really nice moment. And then it starts doing this flash forward of a montage of everything that each character does. Roy becomes coach. Nate joins the team again, or Nate's on the team at the beginning of the episode. Beard and Jane get married. Yeah. And it does that, and then it cuts to Ted asleep, and the plane lands and he wakes up. Was the whole thing a dream? Was the entire montage a dream of Ted seeing, what's going to happen when he's not there? Rebecca's going to end up with weird Swedish guy, and, not Swedish, he's from Denmark, Danish guy, and, Beard's going to end up with this girl who's not been very nice to him for a really long time. Was the whole thing just Ted, was the entire thing just Ted seeing, what happens when he's not there? Is he going to go back? He better go back and see. They better do a season 4. Now, I think what I think is going to happen. That would be insane if they did that. If they pulled a Roseanne, where she just wakes up and where John Goodman's character dies at the end of that show, and then in the next season she just kind of wakes up and it's it was all a dream. I would love for them to do that because I hate superficially I loved all of the payoff, and it's the perfect end to this journey for Ted. But Ted's arc is not complete. Ted's arc is not done. Everyone else's arc is maybe complete. Maybe. I don't think Rebecca's is done. But Ted's arc is not complete. Ted's arc has been going from people-pleasing, doing everything he can to make everyone else happy, to saving room for himself and allowing himself to take up space. He genuinely, he has this heart-to-heart conversation with Rebecca where she is pouring her heart out to him. And he says 3 words. In this finale, Ted is just absolutely not allowing himself to take up space. It's like he just can't allow himself to have that happiness. And that's frustrating. That's frustrating. But if it's all a dream, that's even more frustrating. If it's all a dream, that's even more frustrating. You pitch this season as the end of the show, and then did a really, really bad, and then did a really, really kind of unsatisfying finale. And then you're gonna come back and be like, all those things that were unsatisfying, but were closure. Forget it all. We're gonna do 3 more seasons. I don't know. They wrote themselves into a no-win situation here. Episode 11 is one of my favorite episodes of the entire show. Season 3 was rocky, but it was still a really, really good season of the show. There's great moments. But they in this finale, the writers just kind of proved they did not understand what they set up. They didn't understand, they understood superficially what Ted represented, but they really, really did a disservice to Ted as a character. And I think for people who really, really fell in love with Ted and really, really wanted Ted to be happy, that there's no way this episode is not going to be disappointing. So yeah, I thought it was a decent I thought it was a good season finale. As in, it felt like the Dark Forest. It felt like we just hit the Dark Forest. Genuinely, like, you want to talk about rom-communism? We just hit the Dark Forest. We are not at the end of the story. It felt like we just hit the Dark Forest. Um, yeah, just not really kind of disappointing. But like I said, there's a lot of superficially satisfying moments, and there's a lot of really, really good payoff. I cried. It's a good episode. But if it's the end of the show, that's incredibly dissatisfying. I said in another YouTube short that I thought they were gonna do like an AFC Richmond show and then do season 4, like do a Book of Boba Fett, do an AFC Richmond show that has Ted recur, and then at the end of that show have Ted decide to come back and then do season 4. Um, Now that I've like pitched it, the It's All a Dream scenario, I would be fine if they just decided to do season 4. Like, forget spinoffs, just do season 4. Um, but like like you could easily do spinoffs. You could do the girls team. You could keep doing KBPR because she adds Barbara's name to the thing. You can keep doing the Keeley thing. Um, but Ted's arc is not complete. The arc of your lead character is not complete, and I think you don't owe it to your audience, because I hate the idea that creators owe their audience anything. I hate that. But, like, you do kind of owe it to the character to complete the arc. Like, you owe it to the story to complete the arc that you put your character on. Um, so yeah, that's my take on the Ted Lasso finale. It's it's a good season finale, but if it's the end, it's a good season finale because it feels like a cliffhanger. But if it's the series finale, what the hell just happened? What the hell were they thinking? Um, yeah, so that's my take on Ted Lasso season 3 episode 12. Let's get into some movies now. This is gonna be fun. This is gonna be weird. Okay, so the first movie that I watched this week is the one I have the least to say about. So back, I think it was the week Scream came out. There was a movie called Inside, starring Willem Dafoe, where he plays an art thief who tries to steal who's like robbing a rich dude, and he gets trapped in his apartment, and then just stuck there for like days. Um, which is a really interesting premise and could be really interesting if you actually have interesting ideas and something to say. This movie doesn't. This movie was like watching paint dry for an hour and 45 minutes. Genuinely. The performance, Willem Dafoe is great in it. Willem Dafoe's excellent. He's an incredible performer. Willem Dafoe's incredible, and it's shot really well. Like, the cinematography is really good. It's a really, really pretty movie to look at. But I don't, like, am I just too dumb to understand what this movie's trying to say? Or does the movie just not have any ideas? Does the movie just not have anything to say? I'm using my hands a lot. Just genuinely, like, it tries to do some stuff in, like, about 2/3 of the way through, and I was just like, what are we doing? Like, what, like, this would be interesting if you would set any of it up. If you would set, if you would set, like, this specific relationship up. But at this point, I don't even really understand if this relationship is real or not. I don't understand if these characters actually know each other, or if Willem Dafoe's character has just gone insane. Like you haven't done anything to set this part up. So even that, which like could have been interesting, is not, because I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. It's a film that there's a difference. The next film we're gonna talk about is a film that doesn't give you a lot, but I think it gives you enough that it's incredibly open to interpretation. This movie gives you nothing. Gives you like half of an idea and is like, maybe go try and interpret that. Go do your video essay about that. this movie feels like it's made for video essayists on YouTube, except it doesn't have any ideas. It doesn't have anything to make an essay about. There's nothing. They're there's an opening over voiceover about like how art lasts forever, but the movie doesn't really do anything with that. The movie doesn't really do anything with like that as an idea. Um, yeah. So either I'm too dumb to understand what this movie was trying to say, or this movie wasn't really trying to say anything. It had the ingredients of something it was trying to say. It's like a carrot. You know how carrots, or it's like the tip of the iceberg without the iceberg underneath. You know, it's just this very surface level. Like maybe this is an idea. Like maybe this is a thing sticking out that you could latch on to, and like there's all these clues pointing to what the theme might be, but none of like they're not connected in any way. None of them actually lead you anywhere. Um, yeah, this is literally I was so bored. I don't like I'm gonna sound like an old man, but I don't like putting movies on past like 9 o'clock. Um, I am in like wind down mode at about 10. So if I have to focus on a movie, I can't really wind down. But this movie I put it on at like 9:30. So I was just mad at all the time that I wasted, at the fact that I wasted all that time. Um, because ultimately that's what the film feels like. Like it feels like you're wasting your time watching paint dry. It's genuinely miserable. Um, yeah, it's not. This ain't it. This was not it, unfortunately. Yeah, I don't know. That's my take on Inside. Not the Bo Burnham sketch, because that's not the Bo Burnham special. Inside is one of the best pieces of media of the decade so far. This was miserable. um, yeah, so that's my take on Inside with Willem Dafoe. It's not good. I would not recommend it. Let's jump into some stuff that I would actually recommend and actually was actually really good. Um, yeah. Okay, so movie number two this week. I This is another one I watched at like 9 o'clock, but I did not feel like I wasted my time. Audition. If you're a horror fan, like if you like horror movies, you may not have seen Audition, but you've probably heard of it. I think it's a Japanese horror film. It's a Japanese film. And it's about a TV executive whose wife dies. And after his wife dies for about 7 years, he kind of lives on his own. And then he decides he wants to get remarried. So he decides he's going to hold auditions for a fake movie for his new to find a new wife. Well, it's a real movie, but it's not really a real movie. And this movie's fascinating. I'm gonna say as little as possible. I'm gonna say as little as possible because I think if you go into this movie blind, uh, you'll have like the best experience. A couple of things to be prepared for. Like 80% of this movie, it's a straight romantic drama. Maybe not 80, maybe more like 60, 55%. But like more than half of the movie is just basically like a romantic drama. And then it like takes a turn. I forget what I said. I'm going to talk about the whole movie. I'm going to talk about the whole damn thing. Um, it takes such a large left turn about 60% of the way through that like it goes from not scared like why does this have an R rating to oh my god what is happening? What are we doing here right now? Um, Genuinely, like the pacing is so methodical, like so deliberate and methodical, and it's not like a long movie. It's like an hour and 45 minutes, I think. Um, but like the goal of the movie is not it's not really horror, it's to explore this relationship and this person, this specific guy. Um, cause basically, I have like a lot of thoughts about this movie. I I could understand if like you watch this movie and are really turned off by the first hour and 20 minutes. Really turned off because it's really slow. Like like you go into this movie expecting a horror movie, you look at the poster and you're like, "What is that?" Um, and then like the first hour and 20 minutes of the movie is this very complex character drama about grief and dishonesty and fear and anxiety and regret. Um, and then it takes that turn. And I so like the movie's about a TV executive basically taking advantage of women in order to find a sexual relationship. This movie was probably ahead of its time in the wake of like the Weinstein thing and the Me Too stuff, the Me Too movement. This movie was like 15 years before all that. This movie was so far ahead of its time that I found it just fascinating watching um like really getting into this character's head as he makes these terrible decisions. Um and I thought like like it's a movie very steeped in Japanese culture, specifically Japanese gender politics. It's a movie about like the very specific form of patriarchy that exists in Japanese culture. But I think that story is kind of universal in the way that at least as an American, as a white dude, for us, like as an American, looking at the way we treat women, I think it is kind of universal. Because I think at the end of the day, Audition is a story about fear. It's a story about fear. Um, so it takes that turn in the second half, and it starts, and um, you start getting reveals about the girl that he's been the girl he's been seeing, and like their relationships. Their relationship seems fairly innocent up to this point. There's a couple of cutaways to her in a weird situation. This movie has one jump scare. I'm pretty sure there's one jump scare in this entire movie, and it might be the best laid out jump scare I've ever seen in any movie ever. Um, it genuinely freaked me out. But but it's so perfectly set up, as in like it's because it's in such plain sight that you're like, I know, like I'm already terrified of what that thing is, and then you realize that thing is something else, and it's even more terrifying. Um, so yeah, I think this movie is a movie about male fear, or male like fear and misogyny. Like the root of misogyny almost seems to be fear, or the two are so deeply intertwined that there's such a divide between men and women. At least in certain circles with certain people, specifically the lead character of this movie. I think the lead character in this movie uh, is just like, because he's doing this thing because it wasn't necessarily his idea to hold auditions and make a fake movie. It was another guy's idea. Um, and he just kind of goes along with it. And I think once you get, this is one of those movies. This is interesting. This is a movie that I think the idea of it's all a dream actually works. I think it actually works. I like that. This is full spoilers. I think the last 30 minutes of this movie is all a dream. Uh, So was the end of Ted. I also think the montage at the end of Ted Lasso was maybe all a dream. So maybe there is some connections, but I think the last like 30 minutes of this movie is all a dream. I think because the characters go on this trip together, and then um, they sleep together for the first time, and I think the rest of the movie plays out in his dreams that night. That feeling of like he really like he that I think he feels shame and regret over the fact that he took advantage of this girl. So his brain starts catastrophizing all of the ways that could come back to bite him in the ass. Um, and if that's the interpretation of this movie, if I'm right about that, if I'm right about the fact that this movie is about male fear and the patriarchy, then it's a brilliant character study of men in power. It's brilliant. It's incredible and so far ahead of its time. If the things that happen at the end of this movie actually like happen, if they're actually real, I think it gets a little bit weirder. If everything we see at the end of this movie is actually true, I think it gets a little bit weirder and maybe a little bit more like problematic if you get into like conversations about like because I mean then it's all about how a victim of abuse turned into an abuser. Um, and I don't know. That's less interesting. The more interesting idea is, at least to me, is, and maybe this is just me being a dude. It's an exploration of the relationship men and women have that is so full of fear and so full of shame about like who they are. Um, that I think that's really interesting, and that exploration is really interesting. Um, yeah, so like the thing that I think makes this movie so incredible is yes, it's scary. It has all of the great horror elements. It has all the great drama elements. It's a great drama, but it has all the great horror elements. There's gore. There's a jump scare. There's you know dead bodies. There's weird imagery. It has all of the hallmarks of a great horror, but it also leaves you with so much more to think about once you're done. How do you interpret the ending? How do you interpret, this character? It's actually brilliant. On a lighter note, the character of Asami is just really cool. Like she's really attractive, and yeah, hear me out. um, yeah, I'll never take my feet for granted ever again, ever. God, there's some gross stuff in this movie, but it also understands that there's stuff you shouldn't show. There's stuff you don't show. There's stuff that's scarier when you don't show it. God, the torture segment in this movie is so good. It's so good, y'all. Um, yeah, this I thought this movie was incredible. I thought the performances were incredible. I thought the editing was really incredible, especially with like my kind of interpretation of it. You never leave his perspective. You never leave, even though like it seemingly cuts away to places that he's not at. If I'm right, then all you're seeing is flashes of his anxiety about what this might be, what might be happening. Yeah, I thought Audition was kind of incredible. I thought this movie was amazing. Um, the performances are incredible. His son is really good. Um, maybe not get half a star because they kill the dog. They kill the dog. There's a dog that dies. But yeah, it's brilliant. It's incredible. And if you haven't seen it, I would if you can handle horror, if you like horror or if you like drama but can handle horror, go watch Audition. It's incredible. Yeah, that's my take on Audition. Let's jump into the next movie. Okay, so next movie. This is like jumping to the complete like opposite end of the spectrum. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. I talked about Into the Spider-Verse last week. A movie that like it took me a couple watches to really click, but that I think is absolutely incredible in almost every way. I think the voice cast is incredible. The animation is the greatest animation ever put to film. Um, uh, and it's a really, really good movie. It's a good, like, complete story with setups and payoffs, and the payoffs are all great. And I'm a payoff guy, so that really helped. Um, so what did I think of Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse? Coming into it, like, the hype was this is better than the first one. One of the greatest animated films of all time, a genuine piece of art, um, and like in terms of animation, nothing had ever been done before like it. Um, and I completely agree with all of those things. This is one of the greatest animated films of all time. Um, I put out my initial reaction, and I said that um, I like it got knocked back a little bit because it wasn't as satisfying as the first film. I've seen it twice, so I watched it a second time, and I don't know. I don't think I agree with that anymore. I think there is a lot of. I think this is a really satisfying, complete story. I think the epilogue, like you get this final confrontation, and then there's like 20 or 30 minutes left. I guess careful for spoilers. Sorry. But you get this final confrontation, and then I thought the last like 20 or 30 minutes uh, dragged a little bit, dragged somewhat. As in, I think the music kicks in like one too many times, so they kind of overly set you up for the fact that the movie's ending, um, without uh, without like actually providing like the clear endpoint was 30 minutes ago. The point to end was 30 minutes ago. This is all just extra stuff. Um, but like that's a minor nitpick. This is my God. Like I cannot believe this movie exists. From the opening like 5 minutes is just this is the opening 5 minutes is like this is the best animation I've ever seen. And then the movie does nothing but top that for the next 2 hours and 15 minutes. It's insane. It's psychotic. Like, because it opens with like this cold open on Gwen, and it talks about Gwen's perspective and Gwen's life, and you get some more development for her and some her more development about her relationship with her father. Um, and the way her world is laid out is really awesome because like it's like I've heard it like she described it as like Haley Steinfeld. This guy described it as like a mood ring. The colors change based on the emotion of the scene and the way characters feel. Um, and I thought that was just beautiful. I thought it was incredible. But then um, it starts mixing animation styles. Like another character shows up from another universe, and once that starts happening, I'm like, I don't know how they did this. I don't know how. I don't know. I don't really understand how. I don't know how you do this. I don't know how this works. This is the magic of movies. If I don't understand what I'm watching on screen, like it's incredible. And even just like going back to that opening sequence, this movie does a really, really good job of conveying characters' inner thoughts in a way that you couldn't do in live action. It conveys that you really, really get into the characters' heads in a way that you never could in live action. You never could anywhere else. Um, and I really, really love that. There's a transition. There's a couple of transitions in the opening, like 2 minutes of the movie that just like when they happened, it was like oh, like absolutely mind blowing from an emotional standpoint. From a technical standpoint, the movie's mind blowing all the way through. But once you get to a certain point, um, uh, there's a sequence in a museum. Once you get to a certain point, it really, really like blows up, and everything about the movie just changes. And from a technical standpoint, it becomes a magic trick. It becomes a magic trick in that moment. So you get this cold open with Gwen, and then then you start meeting Miles. You start reconnecting with Miles and getting that plot. Um, Yeah, so you reconnect with Miles, and you start developing his relationship with his parents because I think, and this is where I'm gonna kind of get into spoilers. I'm seeing a lot of people who are like, this is Gwen's movie. Gwen is the character who has the arc that gets fulfilled, which is true, but I think there's another set of characters who also have an arc that gets fulfilled by the end of the movie, and that's Miles' parents. That's Rio and Jeff. Sorry, Mr. and Mrs. Morales. um, I think their arc also gets fulfilled by the end of the movie because it sets them up as they want to hold on to Miles. They want to keep their kid safe. She has this great speech. It was in the trailer. It was the thing that sold. It was the thing that made me excited for the movie before I realized how perfect the first one was. It was the thing that made me when I was still like, I don't know that I like the first one as much as everyone else. That first trailer and that conversation with Miles' mother was the thing that sold me on wanting to see the movie. But that conversation about I want him to be able to belong wherever he is. And her talking about her fears and insecurities of having to let her kid go, just beautiful, just incredible. And I think by the end of the movie, because Miles has this conversation with his dad, but Miles is Spider-Man. Spider-Man has this conversation with Miles' dad, where he sets up this you gotta let him spread his wings, like this, and he puts his arms out. It's great, and then that gets paid off at the end with Jeff, Mr. Morales, telling Miles' mom, we gotta let him spread his wings, like this. It's such a great moment of he doesn't even realize he's talking to his own son, but his son was right. God, this movie is incredible. The writing in this film is just on a different level of maturity. It's on a different level of sophistication and complexity without ever being convoluted and hard to follow. There's 3 antagonists in this movie, but it's never hard to follow. It's never it all makes sense, and it's all so well paced that you never get tired, you never get bored. The first time I watched it, I went to the bathroom 2 hours into the movie. The movie's 2 hours and 20 minutes. I went to the bathroom an hour and 45 minutes, 2 hours into the movie, thinking I had an hour and 15 minutes left, thinking we were an hour in. I came back and sat down, and then there's 30 minutes left. It's over. But yeah, this movie is absolutely brilliant. It absolutely lives up to the hype. And I think, yeah, Miles's arc doesn't get fulfilled. It's kind of like Ted Lasso. It's kind of it's a lot like Ted Lasso, actually, where everybody, the supporting cast's arc gets fulfilled by the end of the episode, by the end of the movie, but the main character still has a journey to go on. He and he even gets to a point in that journey, but then a thing happens and there's a twist, and I'm not going to reveal the twist. But there's a twist, and it's one of the best laid out twists in a movie recently. Because it literally tells you, if you're paying attention, it literally tells you what's happening 15 minutes earlier. Oh, it's so perfect. It's so good. It tells you what's happening earlier without like 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 that realization just becomes dramatic irony, and you get to watch the characters figure it out. It's brilliant. It's amazing. The attention to detail, I've seen it twice. I'm still there's still things I'm noticing. There's still things I'm thinking about. My Gwen's relationship with her dad, which was not in the first movie at all, is so heartbreaking, and so that's the big payoff of the movie. I agree with that. The Mr. and Mrs. Morales thing is a little bit smaller. It's still there, it's still good, but it's a little bit smaller. The big payoff is Gwen and her dad. And that moment got me. It got me in the first 10 minutes, and then it got me again at the end. I still think to some extent like it is part one of two. I've definitely seen the argument that like Gwen's the main character of this movie. It's Gwen's movie. She has the complete story. Superhero movies are driven by physical conflict. Um, and they're driven by plot. They're not always driven by characters. This movie is the movie itself, the script and the structure is driven by character, but the plot-driven story is not over. Like it's not over. And I don't know that I think Gwen is in the movie enough or central enough um, to the whole thing that you can really make the argument that she's the main character. She definitely has the arc, and but I think she's still pretty firmly supporting, along with Mr. and Mrs. Morales. Um, I do rescind the statement that I'm like this is not as satisfying as first. I think it is that. I think it is as satisfying, but it's just there's also more excitement. There's more to be excited about. And that the cliffhanger is incredible. It's a great ending. Um, yeah, I don't know. I could talk about this movie for a stupid amount of time. I could talk about this movie forever. There's so many details, so many layers. Like the Easter eggs and cameos are awesome. But it's a movie that could exist if Spider-Man didn't. Like, yes, it's a love letter to who Spider-Man is as a character. But if just the first movie existed and Spider-Man as a character didn't before that, it would still be a perfect movie. It would still be a great movie. Um, yeah, I'm gonna make a prediction right now because right now I have this slightly above the first end of the Spider-Verse. There's still a sense of a little bit of dissatisfaction of like I need to see the ending. I need to see the ending. But if they continue on this trajectory, I think this movie moves up a couple spots in like all-time rankings. And B, I think Beyond the Spider-Verse, the third movie, is going to be a top five favorite film of all time for me. I don't know that I say it beating my three or four, but I think it's going to be top five favorite film of all time for me, which is an incredibly exciting feeling. But also like the hype is like up here, so if it's not that good, I will be very disappointed, which would not be fun. But Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, I think I've like not spoiled much. Like I've spoiled some stuff about the ending, and I've talked about like a very minor subplot with not minor, but like a subplot with Rio and Jeff, Mr. and Mrs. Morales. But I don't think I've spoiled the whole thing, so definitely go watch it and tell me what you think. It's insane that this movie exists. There's another sequence towards the end of the movie that is an absolute all-timer in comic book. Like, the whole movie's an absolute all-timer, but there's one specific sequence that is an absolute all-timer in just a character. Like, just character work. An absolute all-timer in just the full build-up of a character's emotions. And the way those emotions are depicted in a way that you could never do in anything but live action. Um, Anything but animation. This movie is incredibly special, incredibly heartfelt, incredibly emotional, incredibly intelligent, incredibly complex, incredibly sophisticated, incredibly funny. This movie's hilarious. And like, if you can watch this movie 5 times, you're gonna laugh at different jokes every time. Um, like it's oh my god, it's incredible. It's incredible. It's like it's incredible. You should absolutely go see it. It's amazing. Highly recommend Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. We got one more movie to talk about, so let's go ahead and jump in and do that. Okay, jumping back to the opposite, to the other end of the spectrum, although it's on a completely different end of the horror spectrum, but we're back to another horror film. I had never seen, and like, I don't know how popular it is, but like, it's popular in the circles that I run in on Twitter. It's popular in the like the tweets that I see. But Jennifer's Body. I had never seen Jennifer's Body, which is a horror film from like 15 years ago, 14 years ago now. Um, and I had never seen it. I didn't know what it was, which is like the perfect way to go into this movie because the first 30 minutes of this movie is just a series of like twists and turns that is so perfectly executed. Um, just like it's not like quite barbarian level, but it's like what the fuck? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening? Um, yeah, it's that kind of movie. Um, and that makes it extremely fun. That makes watching it an extremely fun experience of like, what on earth am I watching? What is happening? Because even down to like the way Jennifer talks, it's like you take Regina George from Mean Girls, which I talked about in a previous episode. It's like you take Regina George and um you you put her in a horror movie, which is insane. It's an insane idea, but it works so well. It's actually wild how well it works. um, like it's great, but it's like it's not like Regina George. It's this movie feels like a spiritual sequel to Mean Girls in a weird way. Because it's not Regina George from the beginning of the movie. It's her from the end of the movie who's had all that development and becomes like a slightly less terrible person. And then and then like so that's the version of like that's who Jennifer is. She's a slightly when you meet her, she's a slightly less terrible version of Regina George. And then a thing happens and she's back to Regina George. I'm telling you, this is a Mean Girls sequel, but it's like a horror movie version. I'm telling you, Jennifer's Body's a Mean Girls sequel. That's insane. But it's so funny too. I was not expecting how like, and it's from 2009. So they use some words that I'm like I don't know. They use some words that like you wouldn't use today. Um, but there's one joke that used one of those words that I laughed for like 5 minutes. Like there is a lot of jokes and there's a lot of really funny bits in this movie. It's really good. Yeah, the the one thing I will say, like it's funny. That first 30 minutes is just full of twists and turns that are really fun. And then I think for like 35 minutes, it becomes a beat for beat remake of one of my favorite movies of all time, Ginger Snaps. It's a werewolf movie. It's great. But it becomes like a beat for beat remake of Ginger Snaps. And that, like, it almost completely lost me. Which is weird because this movie's incredibly well shot, well edited, the horror's great, it's really funny. Um, and I think had I seen this first, I might actually like it more and Ginger Snaps less. But because I saw Ginger Snaps first, and Ginger Snaps came out almost a decade earlier, I was really turned off by how beat for beat that little 30-minute section kind of becomes. Um, Not like I wasn't going to turn off the movie or anything, but like I was like, man, this it started so promising, and then it just kind of dives off a cliff. But then the last like 40 minutes happens and it climbs back out of that cliff. Like I could tell you the exact moment. Um, Two characters kiss, and and I was back in. I was back in. That sounds weirdly like yeah, but I was back in. I was like two characters kiss, and I was back in. I was like, oh, and then it carries it through the end of the movie, and it's yeah. The last like the climax is really good, and it's still so funny. There's so much. There's so many. The things that Jennifer says are so out of pocket. She's just so random. I love her. Yeah, it's a really funny movie. in terms of like negative, there's a couple things in that last 30 minutes that I'm like, I don't know why you did that. Like, yeah, there's a couple that's central to the film, and they break up, and I'm like, I guess that had to happen for the plot, and I guess why you're breaking up makes sense, but it doesn't feel right. It doesn't like it's like it doesn't feel set up enough. And then in that same vein, the actual conflict of the climax, like the actual fight at the end, makes sense, but I don't know that it was that well set up. Like there's so much going on with the comedy and the horror and the different like you know the different things that the movie's doing in that first hour, that I don't know that the actual conflict between the two lead characters, between Jennifer and Needy, is actually that well set up by the end. Um, but but other than that, I think the movie's great. I think it's mind-boggling how funny this movie is. Maybe in terms of pure humor, because it's very dark humor. Like I forget what the moment is, but there's a joke like 5 minutes in that I was like, okay, I'm in. You've got me. It's a very dark joke that only I would understand. It might actually be the one that used the word. Might actually be that one, but it's just this joke that I was like, oh, that's the kind of movie this is. I'm in. You got me. Um, but yeah, this like Jennifer's Body's great. It's actually really really fun. It's great. It's funny. If you know, I guess I've kind of explained too much about it at this point to go on blind. But like, if you've never seen it, it's worth a watch. It's worth a watch. Yeah, and yeah, it's a great movie. Yeah, go watch it. Go check it out. And yeah, let's jump into the outro. That's kind of all I've got to say. And there you have it. That is episode 20 of the Cinephile Diaries. Um, yeah, this is a weird. I am fully aware this is a very weird episode because it's bad horror or bad psychological thriller, good horror, great horror, brilliant animation, brilliant kids movie, brilliant horror. Yeah, or great horror. Yeah. So this is a very weird episode. This is a very very strange episode. And I have no idea. Like I don't. I'm gonna have to figure out some. I don't know what the hell I'm gonna title this. I don't know. But yeah, that's my take on movies for the week. Let's I don't know what's gonna happen this week. I don't know. Maybe I'll see Transformers. And in a world where I kind of need to start, not spending as much money, I may not see Transformers this week. But especially because I gotta save money, I genuinely might see Spiderverse again. But I also like need to save money for other stuff, and I save money to go see Indy 5, which I don't know if that's going to be any good anymore because reviews have started to come out and they're long way from that. Like, this is going to be the greatest thing ever. We're a long way from that now, with Indy 5, but I'm still excited. But yeah, I don't know what's gonna happen this week. I'll watch whatever I watch, and we'll talk about it. I'm still in a horror mood, which is weird because now I'm gonna have like nothing left to watch in October, which is what I always do. I try and watch as many horror movies in October as I possibly can. Um, but I may not have anything left to watch by October because I'm still in a horror mood. I'm gonna save at least one specific franchise. I'm gonna save that for October, but. Yeah, that's my take on movies for the week. Don't feel free to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Let's get a rating on Spotify. I would love to get a rating on Spotify and a rating on Apple Podcast. So please, if you feel the need to do that, please go ahead and leave a rating, even if it's a bad one. I don't care. Just it would be nice. But yeah, that's my take on movies for the week. We will see you in the next one. Yeah. Catchphrase.